Hello there, good people of Earth. This is Monday on Astral Oracles, hoping the lighting on this video will be alright, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to try to get the Japanese cherry blossoms out in the shot. Like nothing outside is as beautiful as those for the rest of the year, so I thought, well, if in any way I could get that pink color on the screen, I would be very happy to share my meager shadow alongside it, and then I'm also going to do a channeling on what is the title? Fabulous Fairytale Fractals. So so let me explain before I bring in the unicorns. No, I think it will be the Arcturians, but the point here is that I've noticed these fractal patterns repeating to a quite amusing and sometimes also ridiculous degree in my own life, and I will probably go into some examples sooner or later, but it's essentially the idea that something basic in our existence is the realization of sort of archaic, almost archetypal story patterns that we're simply playing out, and they're very hard to approach through other appreciations or perspectives than myths and story, and so like I don't know if that's a minor one, but I've been telling to people as I go home and spend time with my family, which has been very good and healing for me. I can sense, but it's interesting that the final boss in the video game of your life is your parents, and which is ironic because it's also the first boss, right? So of course it is, but it is like this classic story cycle of overcoming a challenge and then going full cycle and then overcoming the same challenge by integrating it into your being now that you have matured and come of age. And like major ones are of course things such as the fall of Eden, which is like both a myth of well, loss of innocence and alienation from nature, and well, the ascension of consciousness and man's realization of themselves, and a mystic scheme to Kundalini yoga, and somehow an evolutionary history embedded into itself, and something about men's relationship to psychoactives and to language and names and self-awareness, and of course like it's a giant fable that reiterates and repeats itself on different levels, so it has this fractal character, which also makes it very hard to discern, but you see it playing out a lot of a lot of times in your own individual experience, that sense of having tasted something that brought you into an awareness, but also then into a separation experience, and then you were sort of set out into the world with a new set of pain and doors shut behind you, and that's of course always something that's interesting, why it's a pattern that we choose to repeat. And then recently, what I've really been noticing, and what I thought was so interesting about being in Spain, was I kept returning to the ant and the grasshopper, is usually known, and you probably know it from some version. There's also an old Disney version, I believe, but it's Aesop originally, and has then been retold many times. I believe it was a cicada in the original version. But the idea is, of course, that well, the ant all summer long, the ant is collecting resources and storage for the winter, right? So they can survive and get by, and then while the grasshopper is playing its fiddle and it's just, well, it's dancing summer away, like it's wasting it away, having fun, and the end of course comes to it, warning it, and says, okay, you'll be sorry when the cold sets in and winter comes, you'll be sorry that you didn't fill your storehouses. And of course, sure as these things goes, of course, winter comes, and then the grasshopper comes to the end, and then begs for mercy and for the ant to share in its bounty and keep the grasshopper alive. And then depending on the version, it kind of varies whether or not the how much the ant moralizes over over the grasshopper's short-sightedness, and also of course whether or not like he lets him die or not. I think in the Disney version, for instance, then the grasshopper plays the fiddle for the ant to enjoy, while they both enjoy winter storage of corn and a warm fire to heat them by. So that's of course the very the very child friendly version. And it's a sweet one. But my point here is about this story is that in Spain I constantly found myself in the position of the end, where I was really thinking like, okay, why don't you just prepare for this? Like, why do we have to take every step one step at a time, and then be surprised when things go wrong or something isn't planned for, because we could have just planned for that already. And then of course I shift cultures, and now I'm the grasshopper who's just like, okay, you worry too much, like why don't you just take it easy, it will be fine. Are you aware of how rich and sleek and nice everything is around here? And that's amazing. I think like that fascinating position of once you switch your context, you find yourself repeating the same pattern, but you're just seeing it from a different perspective. And I find it quite charming, and in some sense I do think I enjoy the role of the grasshopper more than being like that stern and somewhat moralizing Puritan ant, who's also kind of a killjoy, right? So like it's in many ways it's more fun playing the fiddle than it is gathering the for storages for winter. So with that long preliminary about fables and like these fairy tale patterns, and how we actually repeat themselves in our lives, I'll bring in my man Umblam, and we'll see what he has to say about it, along with the rest of the Arcturians. So thank you for being here guys. Hope you enjoy. Yes, and hello friends. The purple blue light of Arctur is coming through to you. It's an energy spectrum that's rising within you, and we feel we are very happy to be accompanied by the pink vibrations reaching your optic systems, coming through these screens and systems of photography and, well, data transmission. We are quite pleased that, well, this allows you to sense this idea of pinkish rose light. It's quite beautiful, this light, and it's a type of light that, well, you remember quite well when you turn your attention inside out, but it's also something that you connect with a great sweetness and tenderness, and therefore notice that you have also in your configuration of value assigned to some of these colors, you have chosen to assign the rose color more connected to the feminine, and that is to say even the girlish, rather than seeing it as a universal adventure pattern, the light of the unicorn that comes forward and takes you for a ride through these narrative dimensions of history and beauty and wonder. See, it is quite true that these mythologies of which you speak, these stories that you create, they come to you from a deep place of truth and recognition, much as the same place as I choose to come forward to you through. That is to say, notice that it's still a quite limited frequency band where you are able to capture these higher dimensional energies seen from our perspective. There's a lot of us being lost in translation, so to speak. It's not that it's not being translated purposefully by this person and other people aligned with the Arcturian energies who work to bring them through, but it is to say that we have undergone many experiences which are hard for you to grapple with because you are still in a frequency of time or a mode of acceleration which allows you for experience a great deal of separation, of waiting, of expectation within these different occurrences or configurations of patterns, because what you also realize when you awake is you become aware of a lot of these karmic templates that run through your life, and these karmic templates, they mean exactly this, that once you have triggered a certain action or have come upon a certain phase in your life, notice that most of these phases in your life, a lot of them are embedded into your special makeup. So that is to say, well, it's for almost all of humanity, it is beyond their soul contract to deny themselves the experience of puberty, for instance, should they grow to be as old. And this means that there are certain of these trigger factors which will release certain karmic patterns, and that is also that it will bring you into crisis states. And within these crisis states, you will have certain choices on how you choose to configure yourself, what you choose to do from there, and how hard you want your lessons to be, how much of a delay you want in returning back home to awakening to the memory of yourself. And it's all fine and well, but these are the sort of adventurous patterns that you ingrain in your lifetime. And these are energetic patterns. So notice that all of you, when you were somewhere in the years between 15 and 20, were faced immediately with the idea of, human sexuality as a type of turning point of social interaction. That's not to say that these energies or experiences weren't present in your life beforehand, and they didn't continue to also play an important role, but it is usually in these years, the circumference of these years, where personality configures itself alongside this phenomenon, and this means that sexual configuration in these years has something to do with the configuration of personality. And there are choices being made by the individual that then will have certain implications as to how life unfolds later on. And this would be one of your typical or classical coming-of-age stories that you are aware of, that there are, both monsters lurking in the woods and heroes prepared to save you from those monsters lurking on the other side of those woods. And so those are some of the patterns that you can play through. And another pattern is, of course, patterns that are, let us say, almost structurally mathematical in their lawfulness and their relationship to each other. So those are, for instance, patterns such as, receiver or giver, or patterns such as, projector or retractor. So these are patterns you also know, for instance, as introversion or extroversion. And usually humans are able to switch configurations just as may be needed in the situations that they choose to find themselves in and to be in together. But it is easier for some human beings to be in some configurations. And then when they find themselves in energies where they are pushed into another configuration, they learn a lot about their basic preferences in this. And this was what gave rise to this video we sense as I come through this dear one, this mess who I've grown to know quite well, my dear earthly Terran counterpart, as I am his Arcturian counterpart. I explained to you that this was some of the value always of placing yourself in situations where your frustrations arise by you being forced into a type of role that you do not necessarily recognize yourself in. That is to say that you also find it mirrored the things that you may find annoying about the grasshopper pattern, the pattern of the one that hopes always for a better outcome tomorrow, the one who doesn't necessarily anticipate and thereby is not able to project themselves into the future reliably. And that can be very difficult when you yourself is a person who enjoy acting in that way and at the same time are then forced to play the anchor to that other experience. And so it's very helpful. It's especially helpful for this type of mercurial Libra configuration that we are vibrating through right now, moving its vocal cords and using its mind to transfer these messages. It's quite helpful for such a being as it is for all human beings to have these contrast experience, to be able to realize the balance that goes in and out of your life, and these narrative templates, these matrices that you find yourself in and run through. You could think of some of them, of course, as highly romantic, that is, that they're ingrained with emotion and a sense of personal realization and discovery. But you could also think of them as highly mechanical, that is, that they usually follow quite universal energetic configurations that have been played out time and time again by other human beings before you. And so what is interesting now is that as energy begins to become, let us say, more non-linear and more resonance oriented, that is to say that as you begin to reshape your future and your past from where you stand, and by that attract into your immediate experience these resonant fields of high synchronicity into that. As you move into all these things, it can be helpful for you to come back to some of these fairy tales, and to remember that you are creating a new sense of enchantment within these new patterns that are not quite as linear but still follow energetic trajectories that are meaningful for humans to play out. This is some of the perspectives that I have chosen to share on this today with you. We know it can be difficult, but we are training you to experience things in a different composition of reality. That is a layered set of vibrations resonating in themselves in, almost scores of energetic arrangements, complex symphonies that anticipate itself and rely on its configurations as it by choice chooses to move within a higher degree of complexity, harmony, and instrumentalization, we would say. That is the idea that more and more voices within the symphony of you become audible and become instrumentalized. They become played by different nuanced instruments of your creation. So with so much complex knowledge being transmitted on these fractal templates, these fabulous fairy tale fractals that your own life is essentially made up of, that you began juggling and juxtaposing, putting together and laying out for yourself before you were born, and then now you are reconfiguring as you go along, experiencing and sorting out an experience in order for you to both get home and out there to hold the treasure and bring it back home in one singular moment within the 5D where we are meeting you and coming together in new understandings. Therefore, with my love and my blessing, my deepest healing and my knowledge that you are joining us with greater depth and a higher degree of pure excitement and joy, these helpful emotions in the fifth dimension, where we and other star mates, your galactic family, we await you and are already beaming to you from. With that knowledge, I send you again my love and the love of the entire Arcturian Council, our blessings on this day, sweet humans.